Yeah, I look for any opportunity to talk about Cyberpunk 2077, but it just so happens that there's an actual legitimate reason to talk about it this week because uh, CD Projekt Red released a deep dive about a 15 minute deep dive that is a highly edited version of what they showed behind closed doors at E3 this year. And so they detailed a number of things and revealed a number of things, some of which we had a kind of a vague idea about. And essentially what was in the deep dive was they highlighted the different ways you can play, the diversity of play styles that you can kind of take with your character V, whether you're going all guns, going in guns blazing, sneaking around, hacking enemies. They detailed a little bit more about how hacking works, how essentially you have I guess in standard fantasy RPG terms, you have a spell book, and within that you have various programs that you can use. You can only ever have a certain amount of programs that you use, so you can never hack every part of a system at a time. And when you hack a system, you can gain access to cameras, you can gain access to enemy comms, a variety of different things. They showed a little bit of how the hacking minigame works, and how varied it is. They also detailed a little bit. They've kind of talked about character customization, choosing backgrounds, and how that impacts the way you play. They delved a lot more, I guess, into the lore of the specific neighborhood they were detailing, which is Pacifica. Very intriguing stuff about how basically it was an area that was supposed to be high on development, at a bunch of high class developers pouring money into it to build hotels, and then everybody pulled out at the last second. It's become kind of run down and is now kind of basically a slum, as it's largely inhabited by a lot of Haitian immigrants who immigrated to the US after the island was essentially flooded due to massive storms. So there's obviously an environmental message and environmental aspect to this world, which is obviously intriguing. But a lot of it was kind of a deep dive into what we had only heard about from Games Press after E3. And then along with this, they also released a few subsequent tweets that kind of revealed other things about Cyberpunk 2077, including the fact, and this was apparently controversial among many people, including the fact that is almost entirely in first person, including in cutscenes. We had known the game was first person, but I think people assumed, based on footage that had been released prior, that cutscenes would be in third person, so you could see your character. But CD Projekt Red is going all in on first person, apparently, except for select scenes. And I saw someone who was writing about this on Twitter saying, I can guess what those third person scenes will be. Hint, hint, most likely sex scenes. And then the other confirmation that came through a CD Projekt Red tweet was that multiplayer is officially in the works. We had heard hints about this, whether or not they were kind of beta testing, or not even beta testing, they were kind of R&Ding it. And so they've confirmed that they will be working on a multiplayer component for Cyberpunk that will be released way after the single player releases in April, which I can't even believe that this game is coming out in April, but that is the case. So quite a lot of details, some of which we've kind of heard about, some of which we've seen before, but in less detail. I think we've sort of established our thoughts on this game, but overall, does this change your opinion of the game? Is it kind of concretizing your opinions of the game as it stands? I think this only made me. I think at this point, I'm just kind of done seeing stuff from this game, despite the fact that we've really only seen one in-depth gameplay trailer. I'm just ready to kind of put the controller in my hands, because I think that's the best way to experience this. But obviously, this stuff is very exciting to me. I like seeing how the game will play, even though I'm not 100% certain on the actual gameplay loop. But what were your impressions of seeing all this stuff?
It didn't. I'm in the same boat, basically. It didn't change anything for me. I know I'm interested in the game, and I already knew that. This didn't change my mind on that point. And I know some people had issue with the first person decision, but for me, like, that doesn't make any difference. So
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't watch this trailer before the show, and that is because whenever I decide I'm in on a game, I just like stop taking in stuff about it.
Media blackout.
Yeah, like I want to experience this stuff for the first time when I'm playing it, and so I'm sold on this game and I'm interested in playing it. I am a little bit. I'm not like upset by it being first person. I'm a little bummed, especially given how much they've emphasized the character creation and all that kind of stuff. Character creation just doesn't make a lot of sense to me when it's like, hey, because what they said is you'll be able to see it in select cutscenes, in loading screens, and in mirrors in the world. So like if you walk past the mirror, you'll be able to see your character. And so I'm like, why have a lot of character customization if you're not going to be able to see your character for 95% of this experience?
Yeah, that is something I guess I want to touch on, because it kind of made me think about like what immersion means to us. Because I think there's an argument to be made. They're going full first person because they will immerse you more in the world. That was the entire intention behind the decision. But I think another component of immersion is being able to feel like you've created a character that is your own. And a large part of that, especially in RPGs, is customization, not only in terms of stats, but aesthetics. And in a game where one of your 5 core stats is cool, I think it would be kind of cool to be able to see your character in more than just a customization menu. I'm actually also not really upset about this because I think ultimately I like the idea that you're going to be in first person just because it'll make me feel more connected to the world and it'll make me feel more grounded. I would like to see my character pop up occasionally in cutscenes, but I'm all right experiencing it from just like inside the character's head. I think that'll provide some interesting opportunities for kind of immersive storytelling. That was one of my, actually, I really like that about, I think it's odd about Deus Ex to people that you play for the most part in first person, then you switch to third person when you go into cover and during cutscenes. I would have preferred just to stay in first person for that stuff. But it does kind of like, I think both ways of looking at it are different ways of looking at immersion. And I guess some people are divided on how they see it, but I guess I favor the way that CD Projekt Red has decided to design this game.
Well, I talked about this last night on the rundown, and I was like, I thought we were done with the word immersion when talking about video games. Like,
nope.
Immersion was such a buzzword, you know, like in the PS3 360 era, especially when we were starting to get into like more cinematics and like inching closer to, you know, photorealism in gaming. Like immersion was the buzzword of all marketing copy for games in that era, and I thought we had moved away from that. And to see it pop up in this context was strange to me, to say that like first person is going to allow you to be more immersed in that world. And to me it's just like, well, then what was The Witcher? Like if immersion in this game is, if you're best served by putting it in first person in order to keep players immersed, like why was that same sentiment not true for The Witcher? Is it because of the location? Is it because of the story? Is it because, you know, it is this kind of like larger than life setting that you're in? So that was strange to me. And what I ended up kind of positing last night was more of because what I thought was that there were going to be actual segments of the game you could play in third person. It sounds like I was mistaken on that. So
except when you're in vehicles.
Okay.
And it zooms out to behind the back.
Okay. So what I ended up landing on was like immersion probably in this instance just means like it was easier for us technically to just keep this all in first person rather than try to render out every cutscene in third person as well. But that may not hold up given that.
I don't know if that, I think there's an inherent difference in the way they're telling the story here. Geralt is a character. Like he's an established character. And so it only makes sense. Like you're not really. I mean, you do to a certain extent craft the Geralt that you want through how you react to things, but he is ultimately an established character, and so it makes more sense to view it from without him, from outside of him. I think here, because V is very much a thing of your creation, it makes perhaps more sense for it to be first person because it is you. It's not Geralt. So that's kind of why I see they made the decision. I also think they wanted to they're kind of flexing here, and they wanted to make it more kind of cinematic, and it's a lot easier to do that when you're in first person. You can put your gun away and you can just experience the world without your character running around in the background.
So I'm in the camp of I find person more immersive. I react to things a lot differently than I do in third person. I think about going through a zombie game like Left 4 Dead versus playing a Resident Evil game. Like, it just hits me different when they're like parts of my vision that I can't see until I turn my head and look at them. And I know you still have to turn in third person, but it's not quite the same effect. So I find it more immersive in that sense. But I also understand the people who are frustrated by not getting to see all this stuff they've spent the time customizing, and that's a different type of immersion that they're losing out on. But I also wonder if there's a practical purpose behind this in terms of how some of this hacking and stuff works. I wonder if some of it's going to be able to be overlaid on you on your vision while you're looking around doing other things. And maybe there wasn't a good way to make that look good in third person.
Yeah, maybe. Regardless, I think it's it'll be kind of interesting when the game comes out how many people how quickly this conversation goes away. Because I think people will just be playing the game for what it is. And it is a first-person shooter, and so I think it can be a little bit disorienting to be switching perspectives or on some level. But I guess the main thing I wanted to talk about here was how Cyberpunk has been presented to us so far. Because it has been an interesting mix of word of mouth spreading from E3, us seeing that footage months later, edited or otherwise, and I guess whether or not what we're seeing is capable of representing what this game is. I think we talked about this a little bit, Luke, during our E3 conversation about Cyberpunk, but how much can you show people about this game without just forking over the controller to them? Because I think this game isn't one that is best represented in 15-minute chunks. If The Witcher is anything to go by, that's a game that rewards that you can really only get a sense of after spending time in a side quest, which is often more than 15 minutes. It could be hours long, or time in a main story quest, which is even longer. And so I'm I think my curiosity about this stems from the fact that I still don't get a sense of what the moment-to-moment gameplay of this game is, and maybe it's literally just The Witcher in a cyberpunk world. But part of me wonders whether they've been illustrating mechanics, but largely skating by on vibe. I don't know if I'll even get a sense of what this game is until I play it, and that's in a different sense than Death Stranding, where I literally don't understand what the game is. I understand what this game is fundamentally. I just don't understand how it plays on a moment-to-moment basis, I guess. And so I'm wondering, how do you feel about the way this game has been presented, and how do you feel you understand it based on how it's been presented?
I have appreciated the lack of information about this game. Although we have been aware that it's been coming for a long time, it wasn't like we saw an in-depth look and then had to wait for several years. I think that's just really smart, given the way some games have gone this generation with big claims that they didn't live up to. So on that front, I like how it's slowly been building up, and now we've gotten a lot, but you're right that it's not it's hard to give a little glimpse of something like this and encapsulate it fully. But it's such a story-driven game, and I feel like what I've been shown is what a good movie trailer should be. Like it gives me the vibe without giving the story away. And so I'm actually a fan of the fact that there's a lot of mystery still here.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm a little odd in the way that I like to take in not just Cyberpunk, but game announcements in general. Like, long segments of gameplay don't speak to me. Because at the end of the day, like, okay, I may notice a mechanic or two that's a little different that looks cool, or I can see that it's smooth, or it looks like it plays and feels heavy. But at the end of the day, it's just like, you can't tell if gameplay is going to be fun until you get the controller in your hands and actually play it. And so I don't necessarily mind when any game is a little cagey with gameplay, in the sense of, like, I'm not looking for any kind of fulfillment in seeing gameplay footage. I do get a little concerned when everything seems to be so curated that I'm like, how far along are they with this shit? You know, like, that's where I start to get concerned. Long gameplay footage more so shows me that, like, there are ideas here that are being executed on and that we're further down the road than maybe I would think. Like, and for a game that's coming out in April, which is insane, I just feel like we haven't seen the stuff that makes me feel confident that the game is coming out in April. You know, like, this is all footage that you said was from the E3 behind closed door thing, right? Like,
from that segment of the game, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's strange that they're doing it this way, but I do think that this game is going to get by a lot on the vibe and the world, and I think that's why they're leaning into it so much, is people want to play in this cool ass cyberpunk, like, look at these technologically modified human beings, like, this is a cool world to live to be in. And so I'm okay with that. I'm just more concerned from a roadmap standpoint of what we've been seeing and when we're expected to actually have this game in our hand.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to clarify that I do kind of respect the way they've rolled out information about this game. They're like, let's spread this, let's show people this behind closed doors, get that excitement tingling in the atmosphere, release that a month or two later so people can see it, so everybody's aware of what this is. Let's just stay silent for another year, wait until E3, drop the Keanu bomb, then show people a little bit more, let that excitement tingle again, and then release something like this, which is, as you said, Luke, very highly curated. Like, it's 15 minutes of 2 playthroughs, and the 2 playthroughs compose about a 5-minute chunk of the last section of this 15-minute demo. But I also sort of admire it, because I think, based on the 30-minute chunk and based on what they've shown us, I do get a sense for how the game plays. And they've teased the world enough, especially in this, kind of outlining the lore in like a lore-heavy chunk, that I'm interested in the world, but they've avoided almost entirely what the story is about, somehow. Like, we have the basic arc that you're a street tough, you're like a street tough dude or woman, kind of working your way up the ranks of Night City. Beyond that, I am unsure of the general story of this game, and I think they've done that on purpose. They said specifically it's heavily edited to avoid spoilers, and they've only really hinted at what Keanu Reeves even is, like, as a construct in this world. So like you said, Larry, I actually really like that there's still a hefty dose of mystery around what this game is about. The vibe keeps me engaged, and I feel like I get a sense of how it plays, but I'm also, I was just reflecting on how little I know about this game. And I think it's interesting for something that I'm so heavily anticipating, that's due out in less than a year, to not really know too much about either the story or moment-to-moment gameplay, and whether that's up to how they can present this or how they choose to present this, I'm still a little unclear on. But
I think that the stage announcement stuff is less to do with CD Projekt Red and more to do with just, like, the way E3 has been going over the last couple of years. Like, where I imagine that Xbox has quite a bit of say in what CD Projekt Red can bring, and I imagine they probably said, like, look, we're not looking for an extended gameplay demo. Like, we want the moment. And the Keanu Reeves thing was a moment that we're still talking about now, whereas we wouldn't be talking about, like, oh man, do you remember when they revealed this one hacking mechanic in the middle of that E3 presentation?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, they've done it both years. That first trailer, just the way it happened at the end of the presentation with the computer crashing and the screen coming down and all that, it was a moment. I think they've capitalized on E3 as well as they can, both on the stage and behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm just intrigued by the mystery that still surrounds this game somehow. Like, it's one of the most anticipated games and it's one of the most covered games, and we know a lot about it, but at the same time we still know very little. Unlike Death Stranding, where we know a whole lot,
but still
really,
what
does that even mean?
Yeah.